This month marks the 400th anniversary of the arrival of enslaved Africans in what would become the United States of America, giving birth to what's referred to as America's original sin and its lasting impacts on society, still at issue, of course, today, every day. Joining us now, the founding director of the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center at American University and a columnist at The Atlantic, Ibram Kendi. He's the author of the new book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Also with us, Casey Gerald. He's the author of There Will Be No Miracles Here. His new piece in New York Magazine is entitled The Black Art of Escape, 400 Years Have Passed. Where do we go from here? Gentlemen, good morning. It's great to have you both here.
Good to be here.
Ibram, congratulations on the book. Let's just start by defining what it is to be an anti-racist. What does that mean?
Well, an anti-racist is one who looks upon the racial groups as equals, someone who's fundamentally challenging policies that create racial inequity, and they're very deliberate in understanding themselves as anti-racist as opposed to not racist. So they're not going to say, I'm not racist, every time they're charged with being racist, as Americans have been doing for decades.
So, Casey, we've talked about this before, but this moment in America, I'll paraphrase our friend Professor Eddie Glaude of Princeton, who says, people look at Donald Trump and says, that's not who we are. And he said, you can't put it all on Donald Trump because it is who we are in many ways and who we've been, and now it's spilling out into the open. Is there any benefit of having it at least in the light of day and not pretending that racism isn't here anymore?
Well, I'm not sure that black people have been able to pretend that racism has not been here. Well, you know, here's the thing, and I hope everybody reads Dr. Kendi's book. I know we argued about whether we call Claire Senator, we should call Dr. Kendi Dr. Kendi. He worked hard for the PhD and for this book. Everyone should read this book. I wrote The Black Art of Escape because I wanted to write it for black people who already know that this stuff has been here for 400 years. I wanted to write it to really mark this anniversary, which will be right upon us in the next week. I wanted to say thank you to all of the black people that came after, all of the people that paid such an enormous price for me to be able to sit here, for Dr. Kendi to be able to sit here as free black men on national television, but also to try to answer this question, which gets to your point, how can we live in a country that's designed to kill us? Now, we've been told about our people's strategy of resistance and protest. We've been told about our people's strategy of assimilation and respectability. It was Claire McCaskill who said about Barack Obama, the most important message we have to send is that Barack Obama is just like everyone else, right? But we have not been told enough about our people's strategy of flight, embodied by Toni Morrison's great novel, Song of Solomon. It says, if you want to fly, you got to let go of all that stuff that weighs you down. So I wrote this piece, and I hope that we as black people can get to a place where we reclaim that tradition of flight and not be worn down and weighed down in this morass of white supremacy, because the most radical thing that we can do as black people in this society is to be well, not woke.
Explain what you mean by flight. What do you mean specifically when you say that?
Well, just so folks know, historically, all across the diaspora, there was a story, a folklore tale of Africans who knew how to fly. And they'd be on a plantation, and one day they'd say a little code word, Kum Baba Yali, and black men and black women and black children would get up and they'd fly away. Now, did this actually happen? Who knows? But the real question is, what purpose did this serve in the minds of the people? And the reality is that we talk so much about freedom, but the message that I have for black people, and this is the message of flight, is that regardless of the logic, the external reality of white supremacy that has taken over this country and has been the fact of this country since the first people got here, we have an inner freedom. I was listening to that song this morning, this joy I have, the world can't take it away, the world didn't give it. This freedom that we have on the inside that we can reclaim and we can nourish and we can nurture will help us to transcend, help us to endure, and perhaps one day help us go ahead and fly away with Dr. Kendi's book, of course.
Dr. Kendi, Yamiche Alcindor has got a question for you in Washington. Sure. Yamiche?
Tell me a little bit about, as you think about this political moment that we're in, what What do you think people are missing? What do you think people are missing when they say that the president is symptomatic of something that the country's been about? Do you think that we should be talking more about the roots of slavery and whether or not that is impacting people's lives and impacting the political system in the way that people see it working for them?
I do, and I think we should recognize the effects of both past and present racist policies, the effects of those policies, whether those policies were slaveholding policies, Jim Crow policies, today's mass incarcerating or mass deporting policies, are leading to all sorts of racial inequities, are leading to all sorts of racial injustices. And then those inequities are causing Americans to argue, why do they exist? Because some Americans are led to believe that they exist because there's something wrong with a particular racial group, while other Americans are saying, no, it's actually racist policies. And this debate, what is the problem? Is the problem people of color, or is the problem racist policies, is fundamentally at the heart of this debate between racists and anti-racists. That anti-racists say there's nothing wrong with any of our racial groups and everything wrong with our policies, while racists are like, no, there's everything wrong with these people. They're infesting this nation. They're invading this nation. They're harming you. You're struggling because of them. And I think we need to come to grips with the need to be anti-racist so we can see everyone as equal, so we can create an equal society.
Dr. Kendi, I think this is a powerful book, and one of the things I think needs to be spoken about more often is the hard research that's been done about this problem. And one of the things that I realized when I was a prosecutor is that the drug problem was a public health problem and not a criminal problem, and was proud to start the drug court movement in this country. The second thing is the employment. When you factor for employment, talk about the research between black men who commit crimes and white men that commit crimes and the role that unemployment plays in that. Because there are way too many people that think, oh, well, you know, black men are out there breaking the law without realizing it has nothing to do with whether or not they're black. Talk about that research, because I think it's really important to stress it.
Well, I think first and foremost, for roughly the last 50 years in this country, the black unemployment rate has been twice as high as the white unemployment rate. I know the president likes to tout how low the black unemployment rate is, but it's still higher, much higher than the white unemployment rate. And if you also look at the number of black people who are being incarcerated, and then when they come out of prison seeking a job, and in many states they have to sign off that they are a felon, and in many cases they were incarcerated for that drug-related possession or even selling crime because they're black. And what I mean by that is white people and black people are just as likely to sell and consume drugs, but black people are far and away likely to be incarcerated for selling and consuming drugs. So then they have to sign that they're a felon, and then they don't get the job, and then they get blamed that they didn't get the job because of their own lack of hard work, because there's something wrong with them as opposed to these policies.
So, Casey, we have now been listening for about 7 minutes to some critical elements of American history coming from both of you. How much of a problem do you think it is that if you pick up an American history book, 7th, 8th grade, high school, you will read or see nothing about what you've talked about here this morning? Well, perhaps that's what the reality is in your neighborhood. I grew up in Oak Cliff, Texas, and I was taught by black women who taught me my history. So I think there are many people, you talk about hard research, black people have been doing hard research on this question for a long time. George Washington Williams wrote a history of the Negro people in America in 1882. W.B. Du Bois was writing in the early 20th century. So I think the reality in this conversation reminds me, black people fighting white supremacy in this country is a bit like Don Quixote tilting at windmills. I mean, we've thrown generation after generation after generation of brilliant black people at trying to get white people to understand the truth of their society. I have no interest in throwing more black genius at this question. So I think if you want your children to know the history of America, you should read the historians, whether it's Dr. Kendi, you should read Evelyn Higginbotham, you should read Henry Louis Gates, you should read W.B. Du Bois, you should read, I could send you we should post on the show a whole list of black historians who have taught the history of this country, and perhaps some white ones as well. David Blight just won the Pulitzer Prize for his history, and he's a white man trying to get people to see the history of the country. So I think it's been happening. It ought to continue to happen, and those who want to know better have to learn better, have to do better.
Kenny, you got a lot of interesting statistics, and carry on with the theme of schooling and education there. Some of the information that you've got in the book about the difference of how well a black child does if they have a white teacher compared to a black teacher. Give us some of the information you have on that.
Yeah, I mean, scholars and are finding that white teachers, that I should say, when a black child has a black teacher, that they're far and away more likely to graduate from college, graduate from high school, that they found that white teachers are, I think, 70% more likely to not have higher expectations for the same black child that a black teacher has higher expectations for. And so how we look upon a child, a 9-year-old child, and as someone who can learn, as someone who can thrive, as someone who can be excellent, as opposed to someone who's just a behavioral problem, impacts that child, possibly for the rest of their life. And so racist ideas are impactful, right? They don't just kill people, as we saw in El Paso. They literally harm people's lives. And that's why I'm struggling and striving to get Americans to see how important it is to be anti-racist.
It's just the tip of the iceberg. It's all in this book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. It's available now. Dr. Ibram Kendi, thank you very much. Casey Gerald, thank you as well. Be sure to check out his latest piece, The Black Art of Escape, 400 Years Have Passed. Where do we go from here? That's in New York Magazine. Gentlemen, we appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The KitchenAid Smart Oven Plus with powered attachments. Connect to grill, connect to steam, and crisp. An oven that breaks the...
Really? If you hear me, I'm trying to fix this. Not doing a very good job. Doing this wonderful dude. son. This thing is recording forever.